There are days in a man's life that mark a before and after. Not because of tragedy or celebration or some life-altering epiphany, but because in a single, unremarkable moment the curtain gets pulled back and you see what's been there all along. For me, that moment happened on a lazy Sunday afternoon when I picked up my wife's tablet off the kitchen counter. Lauren was upstairs in the shower, singing along to some upbeat pop song that made her sound 17 again. I remember thinking it was kind of nice to hear her voice like that. We hadn't laughed together in weeks, maybe months. The tension between us had been building, sure, but I had chalked it up to stress, her job at the school, my work at the garage, the usual wear and tear of a 24-year marriage. I didn't think much of it when she started going to bed early or staying out later than usual. She was tired, that's all. We were both tired. But that afternoon, something gnawed at me. Maybe it was the way she left her tablet behind without a second thought when she normally took it everywhere. Maybe it was how she'd been smiling at her phone lately in a way that didn't quite belong to me. I picked it up, telling myself I was just going to check the weather app. I wasn't looking to find anything. I didn't even know what I expected. What I found was a draft email, unsent, unfinished, and almost hidden at the bottom of her inbox. No subject line, just the word D in the recipient field. Curiosity pulled me in before I could stop myself. I tapped it open. It took me a second to process what I was seeing, then another to feel the room tilt sideways. There was a photo attached. Lauren, in bed, sheets pulled halfway up. Her shoulder bare. Her hair tousled like she'd just woken up or just finished something in asterisk mate. But what made my heart stop wasn't her expression or the fact that she looked more alive in that photo than she had in months. It was the hand. A man's hand resting lightly but possessively on her thigh. Big tan with a faint scar on the knuckle. Not mine. I stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked hard enough. But it didn't. It stayed right there, frozen in time, screaming a truth I hadn't wanted to see. At first, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I didn't understand what I was looking at. But the timestamp K** led that hope fast. It was taken 3 weeks ago. On a Thursday. The same Thursday she told me she had a faculty dinner that ran late. I stood there, holding the tablet like it was radioactive. My mouth was dry. My heart pounded like I'd just sprinted a mile. I felt this cold wave move through me, shock, disbelief, then something heavier. Something closer to morning. When she came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, she didn't notice anything was off. She hummed her way to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and only looked at me when I said her name. Lauren, I said, quieter than I meant to. She turned, unscrewing the cap. Yeah? I held up the tablet. My hands were shaking. I saw this. She blinked, confused at first. Then her eyes darted to the screen. For a second, just a second, she froze. Her whole face changed. Then she smirked. Like I just told her a bad joke. You went through my tablet, she said, setting the water down on the counter. That's a pretty serious breach of privacy, Tom. I just stood there. I didn't have words for that. She walked over, calm, like this was a normal conversation. That was a joke, she said, brushing past me to grab a dish towel. A friend dared me. You know how dumb stuff gets passed around in group chats. I said nothing. I just stared. It didn't mean anything, she added, her tone flat, eyes trained on the sink like she couldn't be bothered to look at me. You're blowing this way out of proportion. That's not your hand, I finally said, my voice hoarse. And that's not our bed. She sighed. Loudly. Like I was being dramatic. You've been acting paranoid for weeks, she said. Maybe if you spent half as much time trusting me as you do checking up on me, we wouldn't be in this position. That was the moment something broke. Not between us. That had happened long ago, I just hadn't noticed. What broke was the version of reality I'd been clinging to. The one where we were still partners. Where I was still the man she came home to, not the one she hid from. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't even pretend to care that she'd been caught. Instead, she accused me of spying, of overreacting, of making her feel suffocated. I need space, she said, brushing past me. I'm going out. And just like that, she was gone. The door slammed behind her like a gavel. I sat down at the kitchen table, the tablet still in my hands, the image burned into my memory. I couldn't stop staring at it. Not because I needed more proof, there was no room left for doubt. But because I couldn't quite believe it. How had we gotten here? When did she stop loving me? When did she decide this was okay? We had built a life together. 24 years. A daughter in college. A house full of photos and shared memories. And now one photo, one careless, in asterisk mate moment captured on a screen, had blown it all to hell. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the silence, wondering where she was. Who she was with. what lies she'd come home with next. But deep down I already knew the woman I married was gone. And all that was left was me. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid there wide-eyed in the dark, listening to the quiet creaks of our house. I could hear the wind outside, the soft buzz of the fridge, the occasional shift of the pipes. But Lauren never came home. Maybe that was the moment I really accepted it. I kept turning that photo over in my head. Her shoulder bare, that stranger's hand like a brand on her thigh. I'd seen 1,000 images of her in my life, but none that undid me like that one. It was more than the betrayal itself, it was the way she looked in it. Relaxed. In asterisk mate. Free. It was a side of her I hadn't seen in years, maybe decades. And it wasn't mine anymore. Around 4 a.m. I got out of bed. My back ached from lying still too long, but it was the ache inside that pulled me up. I went downstairs, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. The tablet was still there, screen dark now. I didn't touch it again. Instead, I started tracing the memories. Moments I'd dismissed. All those little things that, by themselves, seemed harmless but when stitched together formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. It started maybe a year ago. Lauren began wearing perfume again, something floral and sharp, not the warm vanilla scent she used to keep on the dresser. When I asked about it, she said it was a gift from a coworker. I laughed it off then, even teased her about having secret admirers at school. She'd rolled her eyes, said I was being ridiculous, and that was the end of it. But it didn't stop there. She started buying new clothes, sleek, fitted things. Not the kind of outfits she wore to teach third graders. She'd stand in front of the mirror longer, take more photos of herself in the hallway. Once I came home early from the garage and saw her snapping selfies in the bedroom mirror, tilting her head just right. She jumped when I walked in, said she was trying to document a weight loss challenge with her friends. Back then, I believed her. I didn't want to be the guy who questions his wife over a few photos. Then there were the work meetings. Once or twice a month at first, then more frequent. Always in the evenings. Always lasting longer than they should have. I asked about them gently, not accusing, and she got defensive fast. It's professional development, she'd say. God forbid I try to better myself. I'd back off. Tell myself I was overthinking it. But what finally stuck in my memory, what burned into me now like a branding iron, was the laughter. She started coming home with this light, breathy laugh that didn't belong to our house anymore. It was different, giddy, almost flirtatious. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd wave it off with a vague, oh, the usual. No stories. No details. Just this distant, contented grin like she was somewhere else entirely. Then came the hotel receipt. I found it in the trash about 4 months ago. A small, folded strip from a boutique hotel downtown. 1 night stay, room service charge to the room, 2 entrees, wine. I remember standing in the garage with that slip of paper in my hand, staring at it like it was a riddle I couldn't solve. I brought it up cautiously. Hey, did you accidentally throw out a hotel receipt? She blinked at me. Oh, that was for the conference I went to last month. I roomed with Jen. Didn't I tell you? She hadn't. But I nodded, said, right, and tucked it away in my drawer with the takeout menus and spare keys. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was my wife. Why would she lie? Now I knew why. All those puzzle pieces I'd ignored, trying to force them into a picture of a marriage that wasn't crumbling, they all snapped together overnight. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't crazy. I'd been played. The realization hit me like a slow-moving train. She hadn't just slipped up once. This had been a slow burn, a calculated series of choices. And I'd let it happen. I had watched the distance grow between us and called it stress. I had watched her guard her phone like a teenager and called it privacy. I had watched her turn into someone else and convinced myself I was imagining things. I had been wrong. That morning, I went to work as usual. I needed the routine, the grease under my nails, the clang of tools. My guys noticed I was off, but no one asked. I appreciated that. I didn't have the words yet anyway. When I got home that evening, Lauren was already there. Dinner was half prepped, the smell of garlic and rosemary hanging in the air like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a dry hey, like she hadn't disappeared for nearly 24 hours. I nodded back. No questions. No accusations. I think she took that as a sign that I was letting it go. She was wrong. That night, I pretended to sleep beside her while my mind kept spinning. I replayed every I love you she'd said in the last year, wondering which ones were real and which ones were damage control. I remembered our anniversary dinner just 3 months ago. She'd worn a red dress I hadn't seen before and looked stunning. She'd raised her glass and said, here's to us. And I had believed it. Now I wasn't sure who us even was. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was how easily she had buried it. How smoothly she had lied. How coldly she had flipped the blame back on me like I was the one who'd broken something sacred. That's when I realized this wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a decision. A pattern of them. And she was still making them. That night I made a decision too. I wasn't going to confront her again. Not yet. I wasn't going to plead or argue or try to fix what she had already broken beyond repair. Instead, I would pay attention. I would watch. I would wait. If she had turned our marriage into a performance, then I would sit in the front row and take notes. I was done being the fool in this story. The next morning, I woke up early. I made coffee, fed the cat, and sat in the living room flipping through an old photo album from our early years back when Lauren still looked at me like I was her favorite person in the world. There was a picture of us on the porch, her curled up beside me with a blanket and that crooked smile she used to have when she was completely at ease. That smile hadn't visited our house in a long time. She came downstairs, glanced at me, then at the album. Feeling nostalgic? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just remembering when things made sense. She looked at me for a second too long. Then she nodded, went to make her smoothie, and said nothing else. That silence told me everything. Once the pattern became undeniable, the need for actual proof consumed me. I had spent weeks second-guessing myself, and I wasn't about to confront Lauren again with just gut feelings and scattered memories. I needed evidence, something that couldn't be gaslit or waved away with another dismissive shrug or hollow excuse. That's when I decided to install a GPS tracker on her car. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I sat in the garage for an hour the night before, staring at the small device like it might bite me. But eventually, the numbness wore off and something else kicked in, clarity. If Lauren had chosen secrecy, then I had every right to know the truth she was so desperate to hide. It only took a few minutes to attach the tracker under her rear bumper. I tested it twice before heading inside. She was already in bed when I climbed in next to her, her phone screen casting soft blue light across the sheets. She turned it face down when she noticed me looking. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled. "Just tired." She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. Like she didn't have a secret life unfolding behind my back. The next 3 days were a blur of normalcy, at least on the surface. Lauren went to work, came home, made dinner, asked about my day. But I watched everything closely. I checked the GPS app religiously, mapping every move. For the first 2 days, it was all routine: school, grocery store, a stop at the pharmacy. Then came Wednesday. She left around 10 a.m. She had told me she was going to a training seminar. One of those mandatory workshops, she'd said with a roll of her eyes. A total waste of time. I nodded. Have fun. But when I checked the GPS app an hour later, the tracker showed her car wasn't at the district office or any nearby conference center. It had stopped at a residential street on the southern edge of Colorado Springs, an area I didn't recognize. A quiet neighborhood tucked away from main roads. Definitely not a professional seminar. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys, got in my truck, and drove. The whole way there, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I tried to prepare myself, but there's no way to brace for the kind of truth that rips through your life like shrapnel. I parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding with every step. The house was a modest one-story with a well-kept yard. Nothing flashy. Nothing suspicious except for the silver SUV parked in the driveway. I recognized it from our last neighborhood barbecue even though I couldn't place the owner's face. It hit me then, this wasn't a stranger. Whoever lived here was someone she knew well enough to feel safe with. I crossed the street and ducked behind a parked van. From there, I had a clear view of the living room window. The curtains were drawn, almost. A sliver of space revealed just enough. Then I saw her, Lauren, barefoot, hair damp like she'd just showered, wearing nothing but a white button-up shirt that clearly wasn't hers. It was too big, hanging loose over her shoulders. She stood in front of the window, her back turned to me, talking to someone out of view. And then he appeared, tall, tan, fit, wearing gym shorts and drying his hair with a towel. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. She leaned into him without hesitation. They kissed. It was slow, familiar, the kind of kiss that belongs to people with shared history. Not a fling, not a mistake. A choice. I took a photo, then another, not out of revenge, not out of spite, but because I needed to preserve that moment. Not to hurt her, but to protect myself. To remember that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining it. I stood there for another minute, just long enough to feel something inside me shift permanently. Then I turned and walked back to my truck. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no phone, just the dull throb of my thoughts crashing into each other. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't feel anything, really, just a cold emptiness where my marriage used to be. When I got home, I sat in the garage with the door closed and stared at my workbench. The wrench drawer was open. A half-finished carburetor sat beside it, waiting for me to finish the job. It felt like a metaphor for my life. Half-built, completely ignored. Eventually, I went inside. Lauren got home later than usual. "Seminar ran long," she said casually, dropping her bag by the door. The usual nonsense. I think half of us just tuned out halfway through. She was good. Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't flicker. No guilt. No cracks in the mask. I nodded. "You hungry?" "Starving." We ate leftover chicken and rice while she scrolled her phone. She showed me a meme about school administrators that made her laugh. I forced a chuckle. Then she asked about a movie we'd been meaning to watch. That night, we sat on the couch under the same blanket, her head resting on my shoulder. And all I could think about was that stranger's shirt she had worn, the steam still in her hair, the way she had kissed him like she knew the taste of him by heart. She looked up at me once during the movie and smiled. I smiled back, and I think that was the moment I stopped loving her. I still cared. Of course I did. 2 decades doesn't just vanish in a day. But something had been torn away that couldn't be stitched back together. The part of me that used to fight for us, used to hope for us, was gone. There were no more confrontations. No arguments. No ultimatums. She had made her choices. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. From that day forward, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes wide open. She thought she'd fooled me. She thought she'd covered her tracks. But while she was busy living her double life, I was laying the groundwork for mine. Because once you know the truth, silence becomes your sharpest *p***n. After that day, everything about how I moved changed, but not in ways Lauren could see. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I didn't pack a bag or throw her clothes out the window. That would have made it too easy for her to flip the script, to claim I was unstable, irrational, the villain in the story she was clearly preparing behind the scenes. No, I went quiet. It started with the documentation. I built a digital folder on a private, encrypted flash drive, nothing cloud-based, nothing she could stumble on. Into it went the photos from the house, GPS logs, **TS from her bank activity. I noticed little spikes in spending, lunches she never mentioned, a jewelry receipt I never saw the result of, gas station charges nowhere near her work or our house. I opened a separate spreadsheet and started logging her absences. Each date she was working late or staying over for a retreat got a row. Alongside it, I pasted coordinates from the tracker. Once I had a dozen entries, a pattern emerged. She was visiting that same house every 10 days or so. Never weekends. Never holidays. Just weekdays. Like she'd slotted her affair between grocery lists and faculty meetings. I started sleeping in the guest room. I told her I had back pain. She didn't press. I think she was relieved. It gave her more space, more time to slip away unnoticed. But I wasn't letting her slip anymore. I was tracing every step. Then I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Denise Carver, 40 years old, sharp as a scalpel, and cold enough to send a shiver down your spine. She didn't blink when I laid everything out. Just took a breath, clicked her pen, and started sketching out a plan like she was drawing blueprints for a demolition. "You're not going to confront her," she said. "Not yet. You're going to play nice. Smile. Keep records. We're going to make sure she doesn't see this coming." I nodded. "You got joint accounts?" "Yeah. Not for long. Open new ones. Quietly. Move your paychecks. Start moving any valuables, tools, gear, things that matter to you out of the house. Lock them up somewhere she can't touch. If it's sentimental, secure it. If it's expensive, inventory it. Keep receipts." So I did. Over the next 4 weeks, I quietly shifted money into a separate checking account under a business name I registered through a friend's LLC. Nothing flashy. Just enough to float me for 6 months if everything went sideways. I also found a storage unit on the edge of town. Started moving my personal tools there, my best sets, heirlooms from my dad, specialty equipment Lauren had never even noticed, much less appreciated. I left the knockoff stuff at the house. Let her keep the appearance of plenty while I kept the value. I also opened a P.O. box and started redirecting mail. Insurance policies, tax notices, business renewals. Everything Lauren might use to dig into my finances someday, gone from her reach. I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. At home, I started watching her more closely than ever. The lies came with a kind of confidence that shocked me. She'd look me right in the eye and say she had a faculty mixer, then disappear for 6 hours. She'd come home freshly showered, claim she'd had wine with the girls, then fall asleep smiling. She laughed more. Not with me, but at her phone. She was freer now, I could see that. Bolder. She thought she had already won. One night, I watched her FaceTime someone in the bedroom while I stood just outside the door, heart thudding in my chest. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her expression, the way she tilted her head, softened her voice, ran her fingers through her hair. The version of Lauren I hadn't seen in years was alive and well. She had just relocated. Later that week, she forgot to log out of her email on the living room laptop. I waited until she left the house, then sat down and clicked through. The inbox itself was clean, almost too clean. But the trash folder? Goldmine. Emails to D. That same initial from the unsent message I found on the tablet. There was talk of trips. Of how Tom is still completely in the dark. Of how she'd been keeping things together for a little longer. I copied everything. But still, I didn't say a word. I took her out to dinner once during that stretch, her idea. She said we needed us time, probably to keep the optics clean in case I started asking questions. I let her order her favorite wine. I asked her about work. She laughed, flirted, even touched my hand. I smiled. Every gesture went into the mental archive. Afterward, I cleaned the dishes while she scrolled through her phone behind me, messaging whoever she'd rather be with. She didn't see the way I looked at her, like a man preparing to bury something. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I had passed the phase of grief. I wasn't wallowing or hoping or even heartbroken. I was somewhere else now. Focused. Sharp. If she was playing chess, I was already 5 moves ahead. That's when I started building my next chapter. A buddy of mine had been pushing me for years to open a solo shop, something beyond the shared garage we co-owned. I told him I was ready. We leased a small lot on the outskirts of town under the name Harvey Custom Auto. I used my new account to cover the deposit. Quietly filed the paperwork. Got the new email domain. Business cards. Tools from storage. Lauren never noticed. She was too busy planning her next rendezvous, thinking she was still in control. Sometimes when she'd get dressed up for one of her school events, I'd help zip her up. Watch her check her makeup. Compliment her earrings. She always smiled, grateful even. Like I was being so mature. So kind. It made her job easier and in turn, mine. She never once asked what I'd been up to. That's the thing about people who lie for long enough, they stop thinking anyone else might be telling the truth. So when she wasn't looking, I finished the prep work. The lawyer. The bank. The business. The asset list. The quiet firewall that would leave her with nothing to latch onto when the ground gave out beneath her feet. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was preparing to leave her behind completely, cleanly, and without a single goodbye. Because someday soon she'd come home and realize the man who used to beg for her attention had vanished. And all that would be left was the truth she thought I'd never find and the silence that always follows a storm. It was a Thursday night when everything finally snapped into place. I was in the garage, tinkering with a busted carburetor that had more rust than hope left in it. The new shop was coming along, still unofficial, still a skeleton, but it was mine. My refuge. The only space that felt real anymore. Lauren thought I was just pulling overtime to get ahead on bills. She'd never bothered to ask where I really went each night or why I came home smelling like oil and sawdust. My phone buzzed on the workbench beside me. I wiped my hands on a rag and picked it up. A message from my nephew, Nate. Uncle Tom, you need to see this. Now. Attached was a link to a live stream. I clicked it without thinking. The screen lit up with a grainy, vertical video of a bar, low lights, loud music, the usual background chaos of a place full of people pretending they don't have responsibilities. The caption read, Girls' Night, Getting Wild, winking face with tongue, #teacherlife. I knew the bar. It was downtown. We'd gone there once for our anniversary. Then I saw her. Lauren. Center frame. Laughing so hard she had to hold onto the table. A drink in her hand. Surrounded by 3 of her coworkers, all dressed up like it was a bachelorette party. They were mid-toast, glasses clinking, words half-slurred. The sound quality was awful, but the picture was sharp enough. She leaned into the camera, cheeks flushed from wine and whatever else she'd been drinking, and shouted, "To freedom, baby! No more sneaking around." The girls whooped. One of them yelled, "Hell yes." Another added, "You deserve it." And Lauren, my wife of 24 years, threw her head back and laughed. That moment hit harder than the photo. Harder than the GPS logs, the emails, the kiss through the window. Because this wasn't a secret. This was public. This was her broadcasting the end of our marriage like it was a game she just won. Her voice wasn't just celebratory, it was triumphant. Like she'd finally escaped something awful. And the no more sneaking around part? That said it all. She wasn't just cheating. She was proud of it now. I watched the rest of the live stream, every second colder than the last. At one point, someone in the background said, "Where's Dee tonight?" and Lauren answered, hopefully getting the champagne ready, with a wink. They all burst into laughter. One friend shouted, "Girl, you're glowing," and Lauren said, "That's what freedom does to you." I didn't get angry. I didn't throw the phone or scream or punch the wall. I just sat back on the stool, the video still running in my palm, and let the truth settle over me like a thick coat of snow. I finally understood there was nothing left to fix. Not her. Not us. Not this house of cards I'd been trying to hold upright while she danced around me in circles, lying and laughing and telling herself she was the victim. This wasn't about love anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was survival. I paused the live stream and took a screenshot, a blurry image of her mid-laugh, her glass raised, the words "To freedom, baby," still echoing in my mind. That screenshot would become the last entry in my evidence folder. I didn't need anything else after that. No more spy work. No more quiet calculations. Just a decision. I closed the stream, backed up the file, and sat in silence for a long time. I stared at the wall of tools in front of me, each one worn, reliable, familiar. Everything they touched could be fixed, adjusted, welded back together. But not this. I grabbed my jacket, left the garage, and drove home slowly. Lauren was still out. Of course she was. Probably dancing with Dee now, celebrating freedom. I pulled into the driveway, sat in the truck a minute longer, and looked at our house. The porch light was still on. I'd replaced the bulb last week. It hit me then how much I'd still been contributing to a life that no longer existed. Paying bills, fixing things, folding her laundry like I was maintaining a car that someone else had already totaled. I went inside, climbed the stairs to our bedroom, and opened the closet. I stared at our clothes, his and hers, side by side, like they still meant something. Then I took down the overnight bag I kept on the top shelf and started filling it. Not with essentials. Not with things I'd need for a weekend. But with things that still felt like mine. Photos of Molly and me. A watch my father gave me. The small wooden box where I kept my wedding ring when I wasn't wearing it. I laid the ring on the nightstand and stared at it for a long moment. Then I closed the box, zipped the bag, and left it by the door. In the kitchen, I printed the screenshot from the livestream. Just one. I placed it face up on the table. Then I wrote a note, short, clear, final. "Lauren, you can keep the freedom. I'm keeping my peace. Tom." I attached it to a manila folder containing the divorce papers Denise had drawn up, already signed and ready for service. And beside it I placed my wedding ring. There would be no confrontation. No dramatic exit. No one-sided arguments that gave her a platform to cry or explain or manipulate. She would walk into silence. Just like I'd lived in for months. I slept in the guest room that night, door locked. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finished. When I heard her come home around 2 a.m., the house swayed with the sound of her laughter. Then silence. Then footsteps. Then the pause. She'd seen the table. She didn't knock on my door. Didn't try to explain. She must have known, maybe even expected, that it would come to this. I think she was just surprised it didn't come with shouting. I heard her crying once. A soft, muffled sound through the walls. Not rage, not guilt. Just confusion. Maybe even disbelief that the man she thought she could string along had finally walked out without a single word left behind. But I didn't open the door. I didn't comfort her. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart finally still. For the first time in what felt like years, I slept through the night. Lauren left for her spa weekend like nothing had changed. Hair curled, nails fresh, suitcase in the trunk. She even gave me a cheerful wave as she pulled out of the driveway, like she was starring in a commercial for self-care. She had no idea. As soon as her car was out of sight, I moved. The bag was already packed. I loaded it into the truck, walked through the house one last time, and took a final mental inventory of the life we had built, and the cracks that had split it wide open. On the kitchen table, I laid out the message with surgical precision. A manila folder with signed divorce papers. The still image from the live stream. Her face lit up in a drunken cheer for freedom, and my wedding ring. I didn't leave a long letter. Just a post-it note stuck to the folder. No drama. No discussion. Just done. Tom. I locked the front door, slid the keys into the mailbox, and drove away. No goodbye. No last look back. I landed in a quiet town in Oregon. Far from the noise, far from the ghosts. It was just me, a rented shed, and a dream I'd put off for decades. Harvey Custom Auto opened with nothing but a hand-painted sign and a promise I made to myself. Honesty above everything. Word spread. Locals brought their trucks, their bikes, their broken lawnmowers. They didn't know my story. They just knew I did good work and didn't talk much. That was enough. 3 months later, my daughter Molly found me. She walked into the shop like a mirror of her mother, but her eyes were mine. She'd figured it out. She saw through the lies. She sat across from me in the break room, slid a photo across the table. Lauren with D. Arms wrapped around each other. I thought you deserved to know, she said. I already did, I replied. But I'm glad you do too. She chose to stay. Not just for a weekend, but for good. She said she wanted to rebuild something real, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel alone. Lauren showed up at Molly's wedding a year later. She sat in the back row, quiet, uninvited. No one spoke to her, not even Molly. I stood at the altar beside my new partner. Kind, loyal, someone who saw me as I was, not who she wanted me to be. That day, watching my daughter walk down the aisle, surrounded by truth, I finally understood something deeper than pain. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was survival. It was peace. It was coming home to myself.